Welcome to another episode of Bourbon and Rum. This is a podcast of two brothers from opposite ends of the spectrum. My name's Kent. I'm a rum drinker, and I'm from the left side of the aisle.
And I'm Kyle. I like bourbon, tend to be a little more conservative. Join us as we explore this experiment. Can two brothers from different sides of the political spectrum have a civil conversation and celebrate our differences?
What are we drinking tonight?
Well, here, Kent. We are drinking Penelope Bourbon, barrel strength bourbon. I think I have a slightly lower proof than you. My proof is like 114. I think you said you've got a 116.
116. A little spicy.
Mine is batch number 18. What is your batch?
Oh, hold on.
Yeah, this Penelope Bourbon, it's another MGP bourbon. These guys came into the scene 7 or 8 years ago, and I was reading about it and learned that the guy that found it, it's named after his daughter, Penelope, and so that's who the bourbon's named after, is the kid.
Oh, wow. So I'm batch number 16.
Oh.
Well, befitting my status as the older brother, I have the senior most bottle of
that's true.
bourbon here.
Yes.
Well, for a couple of reasons, we weren't able to record since the election last week. And so
I'm one of the culprits. I had this stomach bug, and I just couldn't shake it. And, you get to where you're super dehydrated, and I lost about 12 pounds in 3 days. And I would like to point out for our listeners, if anybody has a dehydration situation, I wound up going to the ER and they gave me an IV, but the nurse at the doctor, we said, well, I was drinking Gatorade. He's like, no, or liquid IV. And he's like, no, if you really want to fight dehydration when you're sick, use Drip Drop. It's a powder you put in water, and we bought it on Amazon. But I guess the guy that developed it is a doctor that used to serve like developing countries where they had, dysentery and all these crazy diseases. And it is super effective. So I would just, I would point that out for anybody that needs a little rehydration.
How does the flavor?
You're not going to mix it with a cocktail with vodka. Let's put it that way. It's not that tasty, but it's, it really works well.
Well, cool. Well, I'm glad you're bouncing back. That's that's good. So the election has come and gone, and I will say I was surprised, and I'm happy. I'm unhappy with the result, but I'm glad that it wasn't one of these, by 1,500 votes in Nevada that changed the election. I'm happy that it was an unambiguous result, because it means that the Democrats aren't off the hook. You can't sweep that under the rug. You can't make up an elaborate lie that the election was stolen from you. You got to look it in the eye, and I think the Democratic Party really needs that. So as unhappy as I am with the result, I think it's better for the country that it's resounding. I think we're going to pay a great price for it, and I think that's going to be necessary. Elections have consequences, and it's going to hurt people like me who feel like I do, and it probably needs to.
One striking thing I found, and I agree, and I thought about, well, I hope we don't have another hanging Chad situation. But as I was thinking about that at the time, it kind of spoke to the changing dynamics of this election, in the sense that when the Bush-Gore election happened, it came down to Florida. It was neck and neck. And I remember, like, Miami-Dade County, it's, that's much more Democrat versus the northern locations. Dade County was like a 16-point lead for Trump. And we talked about that a little bit in our
Right.
last podcast. I mean, it's a way different party demographic today.
Yeah. And I mean, that would be another day's topic, maybe the utility of the electoral college in today's day and age. I am glad that we don't have one of those minority popular vote situations like we have had repeatedly. I think that's toxic for democracy. And unfortunately, I think it's only going to get worse. I was talking to a colleague who is, for a variety of reasons, he's worried. He's worried about his family and his family's life, and thinking about maybe I'll move to Chicago or Boston and get out of Iowa because I was taking a very hard right stance. There's a lot of legislation that's been passed that's really terrifying for some populations of people. But if he moves to Boston, like the problem gets worse.
Yeah, well, maybe it's a different kind of problem. You get to a major city.
He's a gay man who's married to his partner, and he's afraid that they're going to revoke the validity of his marriage. That's something that I don't have to worry about. But and you might think that that's overkill, but can you really say that that's you might say, well, there's no active proposals to roll that back right now, but I don't know. I think this is why I think extreme rhetoric is dangerous, because I think that politicians aren't seriously thinking, oh, we're going to change the Iowa Constitution and we're going to outlaw gay marriage and we're going to invalidate the weddings of all these people. I don't think anybody's really thinking about that. I don't think, but you talk recklessly enough about it, and what do you want, a guy to not take that seriously? I don't know. You know what I mean? Like, I think that's a serious issue.
I wholeheartedly agree with you that reckless dialogue is unproductive, but I think my perspective would be a little different. I think saying that somebody's a Nazi and a fascist and is going to destroy the country when, didn't start concentration camps the last time he was a president, it's like, it's a little over the top. So, yeah, I mean.
Right. I'm just saying, I think that there's a fundamental difference. I think that was improper to make those comparisons. I think that's an overstatement. I think that's out of bounds, but it's not a direct assault on, I don't know. It just seems different to me than a party that now is got the trifecta in power, that at least some of the people of that party are on a pretty well documented record of wanting to roll things like gay marriage back. If you're gay, that's kind of a big deal. Project 2025 wasn't the platform necessarily, but it's out there. And there are people that were instrumental in the development of that are now apparently slotted for cabinet positions. You know what I can't believe? So the Matt Gaetz thing was a hard pill to swallow today. Like Marco Rubio for Secretary of State wouldn't have been my pick, but certainly a legitimate contender. I'd be surprised if they won't. The Senate will roll over on it, but there's a lot of Republican senators that would stab Matt Gaetz in the back with a screwdriver if they could get away with it. Sure. I mean, he was a really, really controversial figure.
Well, Ken, I was thinking about in context of this podcast, and I was thinking about our last one, and you had challenged me in a couple things. One of them, which, I didn't recognize at the time, and I don't want to I don't want to do this too often and say that Kent is right. I got to be careful in this podcast. But one of the things that you were hammering me on were like, hey, this is really weird that, Pence and all these cabinet members are, openly saying, don't vote for Donald Trump. Like that isn't just like a normal issue with a campaign. That is very different with Trump. And, you were arguing with me a little bit because I was like, well, there's stuff that happens both ways. And you're like, no, that's really different. And as I thought about it more, I was like, no, you're 100% correct. But as I thought about it more, the other thing about Trump's presidency, his initial presidency, was also something that had never happened before. Somebody, one, that I mean, there had been people that have been
Mhm.
president that weren't in elected office before, but many of those people, like Dwight Eisenhower, were in the government organization. This is the first
Right.
completely non-governmental person, nowhere near the government, never been elected, becomes president. And, you know, and I think what we're seeing play out in these cabinet appointees, and which, it's not surprising you're not a big fan of some of these appointees, but, and Trump, you probably didn't listen to the 3-hour Trump podcast on Joe Rogan. I doubt you could have gotten through that. But one of the things he'd said was, they were talking about day one, what's it like? And, one of the things Trump had talked about is like, I mean, he didn't say it in the podcast, but I always figured he must have been a little shocked that he won the first go round. But, I don't know
Mhm.
how shocked he was or wasn't, but he didn't know anybody really in the government establishment. He was relying on a lot of
Right.
people to say, hey, go hire this guy or go hire that guy. And, if you think about the people that he staffed, it was mostly based on, it wasn't people he knew. It wasn't like pals of his. It was a bunch of people that, somebody in the Republican establishment said, we'll hire this person. Or, Reince Priebus was the chief of staff and he'd been running the Republican Party. So it's not like these were outsiders that he knew of. And I think, as you fast forward, I guess my
Right.
point is that what's different about this Trump administration is he's going into this now with an understanding of who's who. He understands who's the establishment Republican, who he doesn't want. He's developed relationships with people that he either sees as outsiders or change agents that he think can go in and implement his agenda. And I think what you're going to see different, which I get that it, could potentially scare people who don't agree with his agenda, is he's going to have people that are dedicated to implementing his agenda. Versus, I think in the last go round, he hired a lot of people that, some supported his agenda and many didn't, and many decided they didn't want to be a part of it. So I do think it's going to be a bit of a different government this go round than it was last time, just because of the fact, he understands the landscape.
I had a similar thought, actually. I thought it was notable that, again, there were some non-government types, but they were not. I think Rex Tillerson's one of the great examples, right? Not a government guy, a little bit of an outside the box guy, but a highly capable, like a senior executive. But now it's been a huge influx of legislators,
Yeah.
legislators in particular, not like longtime bureaucrats, like legislators. Now, this is what I think is going to be interesting, though, is in some ways, I think Trump underestimated the power of the deep state,
Yeah.
or as some people would call it, people who believe in normal rules and regulations and decorum. like, like I think he campaigned on that we're going to drain the swamp, and I think what he didn't realize was that you get there and you don't have as many levers as you think you did. But now he's got all these legislative people, and I think that there's the possibility of another miscalculation on his part. And now I'm not just putting my contempt into this, but I think it's possible that he's misunderstood too, that Donald Trump was a lame duck president last Wednesday. And I mean, he's got his 4 years, but I don't think Rex Tillerson saw himself running for president ever. I think Marco Rubio does. I think Matt Gaetz does. I think JD Vance does. And now all of a sudden, he thinks he's selected people that are loyal to him and supportive of his agenda, and it'll look good for a while, but you get 18 months, 24 months into this, and people start having coffee in New Hampshire, and it's going to be interesting.
Well, and that makes sense. I think the only part that leaves out is just Trump's overall influence in the Republican Party and ongoing influence. I mean, he changed the demographic of the voter base and, and obviously contributed to the congressional gains. And so what are these guys' continued influence on the party? And I think he's solidified his long-term influence on the party. So it's going to be hard for somebody to
I think
fly
so
way out of
too.
formation.
Right, but they're all there's a great apocryphal story about Alexander the Great's death. Stop me if you've heard this, and if we think it needs to be edited out, you can. So Alexander the Great, he's what, 30 years old. He's conquered the world. He's in Persia, and he's sick. I can't remember if it was a battle wound or I think it was like he was physically ill. He caught something, and he's dying. Right, so he's laying on the bed and he's dying, and standing around the bedside are his generals, and it's Ptolemy and Seleucus and Antiochus, and they're like, boss, are you okay? What's going on? And somebody at some point says, have you thought about who you're going to leave the kingdom to? And according to the old story, Alexander kind of coughs his last words and says, to the best,
Nice.
and drops dead. Uh, which led to some pretty interesting times, and that's why you had, I mean, these guys, these guys for generations, their offspring fought each other over different chunks of the empire. But you just wonder again. I don't the death metaphor. I'm not talking about death, but Donald Trump's not going to be president 4 years from now, and these guys all think that they are. It'll be interesting.
Well, I mean, it's a good point. But in keeping with your analogy, the country they're going to rule, or the party they're going to rule, is the party that has been created. If they go and become a Mitt Romney Republican, they're not going to get reelected. They're not going to get elected anything in the Republican Party.
No, I don't. I think you're right. I think it may be, though. My fear is that it's going to be a race to the bottom, and I mean, and that's what Gaetz proved himself to be in the House. He was a flamethrower trying to just create chaos, and that's, I don't know. I mean, yes, the Republican Party's changed. The demographics have certainly changed. I don't see. I think Trump is a once in a generation phenomenon, and I don't think Matt Gaetz is. And I mean, I don't know. I could eat my words 4 years from now, but I don't think I don't like Trump. I struggle to see him as charismatic because I find him so repulsive. But I can't deny the fact that people are drawn to that, and they do find that circus appealing. I mean, like, you can't. This is I'm sidetracking here. You know that Alan Lichtman, the guy who's picked every election correct and then was wrong on this one. Like, he was way wrong, and I think where he was wrong is that he did not acknowledge the charismatic power of Trump.
Yeah.
And again, I just that doesn't grow on trees. I don't. We haven't had a president with that charisma. I like Barack Obama really well. I mean, I like on a lot of levels. But he's professor. I mean, he's charismatic, good on television. And I think George Bush was W. Bush was charismatic, but not even in the same league as Trump's cult of personality. Not even in the same league. I think Bill Clinton had some of that, but I think you got to go back to Ronald Reagan to find somebody that really has that level of personal power, personal projection.
What may be different about him too is that his appeal is so specialized to the eye of the beholder, because a lot of people can say, well, Ronald Reagan was a great communicator. I mean, like Trump, those of us who are fans like him for his authenticity. I mean, because he may say crazy stuff at times, but he sits there for 3 hours with Joe Rogan, and it's the same guy you're going to get on the next podcast. Now,
right.
The flip side of that is if you hate him, it's like, it's 3 hours of nails on a chalkboard, and then it's going to be another 3 hours of nails on a chalkboard. But there is an element of that kind of consistency that is not. It's not typical to a politician, because most of these guys have to be so polished all the time.
Right. And again, it didn't work. So I'm not advocating this strategy, but we did talk about Kamala Harris. And look, I don't think she lost because she didn't take policy positions. I don't think it would have fixed it because I think if she'd have been more explicit about policy positions, she would have just lost other people. But that's the kind of political calculus that most people have to make, right? Like, how do I draw a big enough circle without pissing people off? But Trump completely just sidesteps that whole thing. He doesn't care. And it works or it doesn't work. It didn't work in 2000 because people didn't want. I think when the books are written, I think one of the most interesting things that's going to be written down is, and they talk about it's like this great comeback. And numerically, it certainly is. But it's crazy because the thing that won the election for him was late teens, 20s, and early 30s males. That's what won the election. And there were people that voted for Donald Trump who were 11 when he was first elected, right? And think about that. Like that normalization of like if you were 11 the first go round and now you're 19 or whatever, he doesn't seem as crazy to you as he does to me, right? He seems flat out crazy to me because my frame of reference was Lyndon Johnson, Richard Nixon, Jimmy Carter, Gerald Ford, right?
Yeah,
Like,
yeah.
but if you were 11 and Trump was the president, it doesn't seem as crazy to vote for him, I don't.
Yeah. Well, especially if it's Trump and Biden are your two reference points. Yeah.
Sure.
My only thing is, and I've watched a lot of the media talk about why, and I guess to some extent, if if the Democrats don't figure out why they lost, if I looked at this pragmatically, well, I hope they don't figure out why they lost because then, they won't fix it. And if I was just in the gamesmanship, but we're analyzing this independently of in some ways of our own viewpoints. And I guess I think it's dangerous when all these people are like, well, you know, she couldn't have done anything different. A lot of people are saying, well, it's misogyny, it's sexism, it's racism, or, a little bit like you said, like she didn't need to have policies or anything. I just think she wasn't a good candidate. And it wasn't even necessarily her fault, but she got thrust into this thing 3 months before election. It's like, how much of a good candidate are you going to be? Unless you had some, to your point, some unbelievably charismatic personality or some awesome policy. Well, the problem with the policy thing is it's like you haven't really differentiated yourself from Biden for 4 years. So, and that's the thing she struggled with a lot
Right.
of
You
times.
can't
They're
run
like,
there.
well, what are you going to do to change the economy? Well, I don't know. I feel like the Democrats would have had a better shot if Biden at the outset said he wasn't seeking a second term and then kind of made a major purpose of his campaign to get her elected starting day one. Like day one, no, Kamala
Mm-hmm.
Harris is
Yes.
next. And then you got 4 years of her taking different positions on stuff. And, it just feels like that decision was made so late. It's like, unless she's, again, the most charismatic person in the world or has the greatest ideas in the world, there's no way she's going to overcome that.
I hear you. I don't know that any of that matters, man. I think that, and I will put myself in the same camp because my life's not bad, right? I'm not in acquisition mode in life. I'm in like capital preservation mode in life. And inflation, I'm relatively immune to it. Like, I'm not worried about like interest rates actually going up is good for me. Like I'm not worried about any of that stuff. But the Democrats, I think, missed how bad the inflation, and I think the inflation. I won't say that it's all Trump's fault, but Trump administration spending is not a part of the mess that spiked inflation. You can't hang all of that at Joe Biden. But I think the Democrats failed to realize how that was enough of a deal breaker for those young men. This is related. David Brooks from the New York Times, I heard him, this was before the election, and he said the polling showed at that time, and it maybe even been worse now, the vote spread between high school educated males and college educated women was 75% difference. 75-point difference between.
Wow.
And so if, and I don't think this is a policy thing. Like, I don't think it's down in the policy weeds, but if you can't come up with a message that says we're going to fix inflation, if people are feeling that disenfranchised, I don't think you're going to, I don't think Bill Clinton could have won with that hand. I don't think, you know what I mean? Like
Well, but
the message was just not where it needed to be.
it's a combination of message and charisma in that, like, I think Bill Clinton, he could have had a run for his money because Bill Clinton could sit down on a podcast for 3 hours and he could
Right.
throw out like conjecture about, okay, this is why we're where we are. This is what we need to do. Like he could have that dialogue. I just don't either. Kamala was just didn't have command of the issues or just was not able to have that much of a real conversation. She did that wasn't in her DNA to have the kind of dialogue a Bill Clinton would have about this. It's not just a matter of like an absence of policy. To me, it was just like an absence of thought out ideas on the subjects to be able to have a fireside chat with somebody and explore it. Because whenever she would get into something off script, I mean, it got, kind of nonsensical.
Maybe it's just strategic, but I'm really resistant to hanging this on Kamala Harris. She got her ass kicked in this. And I don't think that that's a candidate problem. I think that's a party position and messaging problem. And I don't know that that was surmountable. And I don't know when that would have been. If to your point, if you'd have started on day one and Biden said, hey, I'm the 80-year-old. So here's the deal. I'm the caretaker of this office. I respect this office and I'm going to do my best to do it. But I'm already thinking about where the American people need to be 4 years from now. And my job is to hand you an economy and a leadership slate that can carry the future. I think that would have been a great message.
I think we agree there, really. I don't mean that she inherently couldn't be a good candidate. I guess what I mean is thrown in the saddle with 90 days to go to figure it out with not having had that 3 years of prep work with Biden, and maybe she's handling some of these major decisions and being able to talk to it. This isn't like something you're going to cram for the night before. Like you got to have thought about this for a long time and been part of the calculus of the administration by then.
I'm not trying to create space between us, but I really think I disagree with you. I think that, and I'm going to put the shoe on the other foot. You've said since we've been doing this, things about Trump's policies. When he ran in 2020, the Republican Party specifically said, we're not going to have a platform this year. We're just not going to write anything down. And I think Trump's run, I think his success with the population, I think his success with the 20-year-old males is not cutting corporate income taxes. I think you said it the other time we talked, they perceive that he's a fighter. They perceive that he's a tough guy, that he's going to tackle things. He's going to fix stuff for them. None of that's policy. That's position. I'm making a difference here between policy and position. I think he's positioned perfectly for that audience. And I don't think that there was any way for the Democrats or for Kamala to claim that position. She is actually perfectly positioned for this whole other slice of the electorate. What happened is that slice of the electorate didn't turn out. They just weren't there. Have you tracked this was interesting. So the missing Democrats, are you familiar with this concept?
No. Oh, is this the blue anon?
So no, well, I don't know, but like there was a huge swath of people of votes that Biden got that Harris did not. And the Democrats are like, they stole the election. They suppressed the vote. They got rid of these people. They quieted them down. And the Republicans are like, see, it's proof that the election was still, because those weren't real votes. Those 30 million votes weren't real votes last time around. Like both people are complaining about it. I don't see that, man. I think that the country just said, look at the exit polls. The number one thing people were worried about was the economy and inflation. And who owns inflation? the Democrats. I think entirely fairly, but in the public's mind, the inflation that they've experienced, the loss of standard of living they've experienced in the last 4 years, or 3 years particularly, it's been on the Democrats' watch, and they punish the Democrats for it. I don't think that's a bad candidate choice. Yeah, we would have been better off to have a longer runway, but that's just being on the wrong side of history, I think.
Do you not agree she struggled to articulate what she was going to do and how she was going to do it? I mean, do you think she could have handled 3 hours on a Joe Rogan podcast explaining her agenda?
No. But did Trump explain his agenda? I haven't listened to the podcast with Joe Rogan. Was it about agenda, or is it about people that he's pissed at? Is it about making fun of people that, like, was it an agenda? Did he like categorically?
I'm just saying, could she have a conversation with anybody for 3 hours in an authentic way without spitting out a word salad? It was apparent.
Yeah, I don't think that was the problem. You just said that the whole point of the reason people like Trump is his authenticity. She's not authentic. She is very much a politician. She is very much trying to play both sides of the issue. She's what we have prioritized for a long time. She was perfectly set for this, for a world where you don't have the disruptor of Donald Trump.
I got to push you a little bit because we talked about this a bit in the last couple of weeks, and I don't want to put words in your mouth, but I mean, the sense I got from you, she's not really offering any alternative. She's just offering somebody that's not Trump. And I think, your thought was, right. I mean, that worked in 2020. And I think the thought was that's good enough in 2024. I guess the question is just, if that's not good enough, then what would it have taken? Or maybe there's nothing that she could have done. I don't know.
There's nothing she could have done, and it's the wrong side of history. That's my point. I wouldn't, if I were her campaign manager, I wouldn't have advised her to go on Joe Rogan. I wouldn't have advised her to try to be somebody she's not. I wouldn't have advised her to try to be policy wonk in a world where people don't want to hear that. I don't think that's why she lost. Like, I understand your criticism. I don't disagree with you. I think it's, for much of American history, that's been a feature, not a bug. That's what you do. If not at the presidential level, certainly in a lot of other offices, and being things like Attorney General of California, that's exactly how you get there. It's a addition game rather than a subtraction game. You avoid alienating people. And it didn't work in this case because the issues were over or insurmountable. That's my take on it. I don't think she did anything wrong. She wasn't the right person for the moment. When the country wants disruption, being the vanilla, smooth kind of, like, that's not gonna work. Doesn't matter what the policies were, what you're like, you couldn't have policied your way out of that. Well, because that's not what people wanted to hear. They wanted a bomb thrower.
I don't think it's so much a bomb thrower.
The reason Joe Biden won,
it's more of like
I'm going to jump over you here instead of being polite. The reason Joe Biden won is because he wasn't Trump, because he wasn't an asshole. And people like, we're tired of an asshole. We want, like, Mr. Vanilla. And they got that. And the miscalculation, or just the mistake of history, is that people did want disruption again. They were unhappy with the status quo.
I think it's a cop-out to say disruption. People wanted to fix the border and they wanted to address the economy. She couldn't answer anything on either one of those. He ran in 2016.
Fair enough.
I'm going to fix the border. I'm going to appoint conservative judges to the Supreme Court and go after Roe v. Wade. And I'm going to root out ISIS. He did that stuff. Now, it's not so much like this executive order and that policy and that law, but it's like, you got to have a point. And I couldn't understand really what her point was, because she didn't. It's like there were certainly issues with Biden around the economy and the border, for sure. And those are two things she just didn't have. I mean, let alone a policy, she just didn't really have any response to.
Right. No, I maybe we're talking over each other, because I don't disagree with that.
Yeah, I don't think.
But that's what I'm saying. These are the hands of cards she's dealt.
Yeah. No, I think we're close. Well, okay. So here's
the only thing.
The proposal that Joe quit and make her the 47th president of the United States for the next 2 months.
I love it. I love it, but it ain't going to happen. You sit behind that desk, you kind of like it. I think that's the lesson of history. I'm ashamed to admit how much money my portfolio went up the day after the election. My Bitcoin, it feels like blood money to me. And, I will say, I find this so discouraging and so repugnant. But unlike people have done in the past, I'm going to say my hope is that Donald Trump is a successful president and he brings prosperity and peace to the United States. I'm not holding my breath, but I hope that. I hope that he becomes a president. I hope he proves me wrong. I hope that he becomes the kind of the man for the moment. I hope he rises to the occasion, and I hope that I would love to eat my words.
Well, I love that, Kent, and I mean it in that I only hope that I could have been as magnanimous in the other way as well. Honestly, I went into last Tuesday thinking I was going to be having that same dialogue to you. I did not. I certainly didn't foresee this being the case. I figured she had it wrapped up. Honestly,
I mean, this is the thing where my values and my beliefs are dramatically out of phase with my investment portfolio. And in the same manner, I got to say, with Matt Gaetz as the Attorney General, we have been given the gift of 4 years of rich podcast material.
yeah, exactly.
Yeah,
Yeah,
and think about if this had gone the other way, right? Like, right, your number one critique of Kamala Harris is that she didn't say enough about policy. Like, if you boil this all down, if we take all the
actually, if I may clarify, my biggest issue with her is she had no point or plan.
okay, but seriously, and if she had governed that way, your ongoing beef would have been she's not specific enough. There's not enough of a plan. I'm
Well,
not hearing anything.
I don't
It's
think she would
dull.
fix
There's
the
nothing
border.
happening.
She wouldn't fix the border. She wouldn't address the economy. She wouldn't solve the problems that I'm hoping are solved. But yeah, I mean, the bureaucracy
Well,
would
again,
run.
my sincere hope is that the country thrives. But even if we thrive, I think you'd be crazy to think that it's not going to come with lots of circus along the way.
Well, and what I guess the encouraging words I'd send to you or your friend that you mentioned and who's worried about needing to move is the last time Trump was in office and had the power of both houses of Congress, he didn't get a hell of a lot done with Congress either. So, not sure that that's going to change a whole lot. I don't have a whole lot of confidence in Congress or the Senate's ability to get anything done, regardless of who's in power.
Well, this sounds, I'm trying to be high minded about this. I'm not going to lie. That fact has not been lost on me. And again, you go to Rex Tillerson, Steve Mnuchin, there were grown-ups who've had real careers and people with strong capabilities. Part of my kind of chuckling is that you're going to populate your cabinet with a bunch of legislators. You think you got nothing done the first time around? I mean, and really, I think that the 2028 race starts now, and I think that's going to be a big deal. I think that they are going to have a hard time governing, and I do think that it's not going to be easy for them. I think the House is going to be. I guess maybe that's why he made Gaetz the Attorney General, so that he's not like
Yeah, at least
unvoting the Speaker of the House every 3 weeks.
yeah, I was going to say Mike Johnson's the happiest guy that he became the Attorney General, right? I mean,
maybe that was the bargain for like we'll pass your budget, but you got to get that asshole out of here for me.
I won't disagree. I'm not a huge Gaetz fan. I think he is an asshole, but at the same time, I do like the idea of some of these outsiders getting into some of these positions. I do like the disruptive nature, but I realize that has consequences also.
Do you know who this Secretary of Defense guy is? Are you familiar with him?
A little bit. I mean, he was in the military. I mean, he was like a lower level officer, junior officer, He's spent a lot of time in some vets advocacy agencies and that sort of thing. And then obviously he's been a newscaster,
Okay.
but I don't know. Some of the veteran folks community I've talked to think it's going to be helpful to have somebody who may have a different perspective on the rank and file and the needs of the people. I don't know. I get there's obviously a lot of people that are hesitant because of his lack of experience and running something that big, but regardless of the party, I do think you need a non-military type. You need an independent person running defense. And I don't think Lloyd Austin's necessarily done a bad job. He doesn't seem like he doesn't seem that bad a guy, but I don't think you want a general running the Defense Department. I feel like you need a civilian who's going to question some of this stuff,
Yeah. Well, I mean, Rumsfeld, again,
Yeah.
talk about people that are not high on my admiration list, but again, effective, someone who understands the crystal clear leadership of civilian control of the military. I'm all for that. Not sure about the loyalty test tribunal that they're going to run all the generals and admirals through.
Yeah. I guess depends on what you call that, but there does appear to be there already are some checks and balances, hopefully, to make sure that we're nominating the right people for the office, but for the military, but I can see some concern there as well.
My hope for the future also is that the Supreme Court, I don't believe in originalism like the conservative members of the court do, but it will be interesting to see because I think that we are going to see the Constitution tested at the margins. And we're going to see if these Supreme Court justices who think, oh, no, it's written just this way and we got to do it that way. Like, do they stand up for that? I think a lot of liberals don't understand that a conservative court is not necessarily a politically conservative court. Clarence Thomas is in both camps, but the conservative justices are just the ones who think that you stick to the letter of the Constitution as it's written. Well, that sword cuts both ways. And if somebody in the executive branch tries to go too far afield, a truly strict constructionist court is actually going to be more effective at reining that in than a liberal court.
Yeah.
If they are who they claim they've been.
So I'm just curious, back to your friend that you brought up at the beginning, what are the concerned, what's going on in Iowa at a state level that is bringing up concern there?
Well, I think it's kind of association. The most notable thing that's happened in Iowa is very, very conservative abortion laws. And I think for people who, again, I think that this goes over a lot of conservatives' heads, but if you read I believe it was Clarence Thomas's concurrence in the Dobbs decision, he said, I'll look this up and we'll put this in the show notes, but he said basically that Roe v. Wade was bad law. He was wrapping himself there in the strict constructionist, right? And admittedly, if you look at the Constitution strictly constructionally, regardless of your feeling of abortion, it stretched what rights mean. I mean, there were legitimate legal arguments with the Roe versus Wade decision that aren't really related to the social impact of what it did.
Right.
And that was a valid criticism. It was badly done, and it should have been. Not everybody wanted it to go back to the states, Mr. Trump, but there's a case that can be made that's kind of independent of what you think about abortion, that this would have been better done as a legislative thing than a Supreme Court decision. But in his concurrence in Dobbs, Clarence Thomas specifically called out some other Supreme Court decisions, and he mentioned, if I'm not mistaken, Obergefell versus Texas, which created the right to same-sex marriage at a nationwide court level. He specifically mentioned Obergefell. Is it versus Texas? It's just Obergefell. I don't know who the other party is. Lawrence versus Texas, that invalidated anti-gay sex laws that were on the books in all kinds of states, right? Like, I think probably Texas still has it illegal in the state's statutes for people of the same gender to have sex with each other, but it was invalidated by the Lawrence versus Texas decision. And the one that just really, like, it just made my jaw drop. He quoted in his concurrence, he said that these cases also ought to be overturned. And among them, he mentioned Loving versus Virginia. And that was the law, that was the court case that invalidated nationwide existing state laws against the marriage between people of different races. Clarence Thomas, who's married to a white woman.
Yeah, but
And so,
but is it?
yeah,
Is he agree
he
with
said
okay, but again, just like abortion, his argument wasn't for or against what it legalized. His argument's a legal argument.
okay, so let's talk about my friend. And if one of the justices of the Supreme Court says specifically the court ruling that prohibits states from invalidating your marriage should be changed, how long would you want to wait for that to get litigated in the courts? I'm just saying that it's
Yeah, I don't know. I didn't understand the connection to Iowa.
The Iowa legislature post Dobbs was very activist about anti-abortion laws, and there have been threats about going after other things if the Supreme Court allows it. And they'll say, well, we overturn Obergefell, we're going to make a no gay marriage law here. And that seems like a stretch to me, but if it's my marriage that's on the bubble, that's a lot to wear. I don't know. And I don't think that what's worst is I don't even think they're serious. I don't think Clarence Thomas was serious. I don't think anybody is honestly thinking about, like, hey, let's go run in part because most Americans have kind of gotten over gay marriage. So he makes this throwaway statement like, yeah, we ought to toss Obergefell. Why would you do that if only isn't just to be chilling to people?
Point of the Supreme Court and all of the legal wranglings, it's like if the thing is hanging by a thread, okay, maybe he doesn't overturn it now, but I mean, if anything, hopefully he's doing people a favor to know that, hey, there's a legal pothole there, and maybe there needs to be a different legal argument to substantiate. Well, you know what I mean? It's like,
so this is where I'm saying, and the reason that it's horrifying to me is because it's Clarence Thomas. Because candidly, if Amy Coney Barrett said that, I could believe that she literally was musing about the legal structure that, right, like not connected to the downstreams. But Clarence Thomas is pretty well known, and his wife's positions are pretty well known. This is not just a legal argument for him.
But he's also saying he thinks the rule saying he's allowed to marry his own wife is invalid. So what's the personal motivation to overturn that?
I don't know if there is one other than to just, I don't know.
That's what I'm saying.
Again, if your marriage depended on this, would that not cause you no cause for alarm? Like,
no, I understand that. That makes sense. I don't know what I'm struggling with the Iowa connection, because it's like, if you move to Chicago and the Supreme Court overturns that statute, it's not going to matter what state. I guess the thought is just if you're in a place like Chicago, maybe they'll enact more protections or something like that. That makes sense.
100% that's the case.
Yeah.
And you wouldn't be afraid if you lived in Boston or Chicago, and you would be very afraid in Iowa. And you're not crazy to be afraid of that, because I do believe that there are people in Iowa that would be salivating at the opportunity to.
Yeah. Interesting.
I think it's a lot. I think it's a stretch, but nobody's going to take away my marriage, so I don't have as much at stake.
Yeah.
I think I guess what I'm saying is I would almost respect it more if it was a legitimate plan. If somebody said, look, we've been doing this for 20 years, but we think it's bad. We're going to roll the clock back and we're going to unmarry all those gay people. Like, run on that as your platform. And here, like, because the Republicans did that on abortion, and they did it for 50 years, right? This was not like they slid something by. This is something that's a closely held value for people, and they campaigned on it. And nobody's campaigning right now on let's roll back Obergefell and get rid of all the gay marriage. So why are we talking about this? And it feels to me literally like, that we're getting long here. We might need to break this into 2 episodes. I think words matter. I think it's wrong to have called, I think it's mostly wrong to have called Trump a Nazi. He's not a Nazi. You can write that down. I'm saying he's not a Nazi. I think words matter. I think the way that we talk about these things matter. And I think that menacing gay people's marriages just for the hell of it, because they're easy to pick on, I think that's bullshit.
Again, you're talking about Clarence Thomas, who said something completely disconnected with Donald Trump or his campaign. I guess where I'm trying to go is like the demographics of the Republican Party are way different than they were 20 years ago. 20 years ago, the defense of traditional marriage and the elimination of gay marriage would be a problem, would be a threat. I don't see that as a threat in the Donald Trump era because the party is so much different. And I guess that's my point is it's like there's all these fears that come up, like, well, he's going to do this and he's going to do that. And it's like, well, I would be a lot more worried if Mitt Romney was the president. Well, you don't think Mitt Romney would be a little more, hard over on that? I mean,
no, you're 100% right on that. You're 100% right on that. And I agree with you. And in fact, I think that Trump and Trumpism is far less a threat to people like that in reality than in the past. But what goes along with Trump is that people think it's cute to insult people. That's what it feels like to me. I don't know. Does my friend have, I mean, mathematically, does my friend have something to fear? No, I don't think they're coming for him, right? I don't think that's not been a campaign issue. I don't think anybody's go for that. And I think the Republican Party, to your point, is far less likely now than they would even 15 or 20 years ago to have been an actual threat to his marriage. But is it?
It just feels like this catch-all.
I need to back off or have more bourbon.
No, this is great stuff. But I just feel like there's this catch-all, like every bad freaking thing in the world is going to happen now that Trump's here because he says all this stuff. And it's like, well, okay, number one, I don't think he's insulting gay marriages. I don't think he's insulting, I don't know. I just feel like some of these statements become like these broad generalizations and fears that, I mean, I can't tell anybody what to fear, and I can't tell you what to fear. And people fear whatever they want to fear. I think they're overblown. Now we'll see. 4 years from now, maybe you tell me, Kyle, you were full of shit 4 years ago. Did you see all this? But I don't feel that. But maybe I'm right. Wrong. I could acknowledge that.
No, I know what you mean, and I think the reality is actually, I agree with you. The reality is less threatening. This is why, and I am hung up on it, and I'm not going to drop it. Calling immigrant people vermin. This is the line I'm going to draw back to this. Like, that's not okay.
Calling immigrants or anybody that murders other Americans vermin, I'm all for. A murderer, okay. I could call a vermin. I don't know if you can get behind that.
What percentage of the overstated number of immigrants? Like, I don't know. Like, so by that definition, then he was talking
vermin. In reference to like criminal gangs that were taking over these apartment complexes, these gangs that have moved from below the border. So, and that's to me like another example of this, like, oh, he's calling every immigrant a vermin. No, he's calling but that is never going to get reported because that just is, I think the left accuses Trump of being expedient. The media is very expedient about what of his comments they report and where. So I guess
he doesn't seem worried about it. He doesn't dispute it. He doesn't, I don't know. Biden said,
he said on Joe Rogan, most
Republican
of the people
voters were garbage.
I mean, he said in the Joe Rogan show, most of the people coming to America just want to work hard, but there's bad people that are coming. And we don't have any way to vet the bad people coming. But nobody says that. Nobody's going to repeat that because that doesn't fit the narrative.
Well, maybe so. I certainly have never heard that said. Yeah. And look, I freely admit that I find that whole line of argument so repulsive that I am going to be select. I'm not going to listen for nuance in what he's saying. I'm just not. I think it matters. And you can say it's overblown fear. I don't think this of you. And this is, I want this said. I think this is important. I don't think that you act like that, but you cannot say that there, and don't give me the both sides, because of course it's true, right? But I'm going to tell you, and Matt Gaetz is the front lines of this, that there are people that offending women and immigrants and people of color and people with different sexual preferences, they are easy pickings, and there is an element and there is a vibe in which that is allowed and viewed as cute.
Yeah.
And it's not called out. And that's wrong.
Let me put it this way, Kent. You don't think I'm like that, and I appreciate what you said. But if everything you ever heard me say was something that MSNBC told you that I said, you'd think I'm a scumbag. Guaranteed.
No, that's not the point. That's not the point. That's not what I'm talking about. I'm not talking about people taken out of context. You think Matt Gaetz is taken out of context? Bullshit. He plays this. He runs to this. He fans that flame, and he flirts with it, and he says the most outrageous shit that he can to piss the most people off that he can. He doesn't get the benefit of, oh, well, they misquoted him on this. Trump, maybe. Honestly, Trump, maybe, because I don't think he cares enough about stuff to have an opinion about this. But people like Gaetz, this isn't about him. He's mischaracterized by the media. He's a self-described.
I'm not defending Matt Gaetz.
He's a self-described.
I don't like the guy. Pure and simple. I'm not going to defend Matt Gaetz. I think he's a jackass.
Okay, that's what I'm talking about. That, and he's not the only one. There is an element of that. I don't know if it's like bro culture or whatever that is.
But I would
celebrated,
love to see,
tolerated, whatever.
I think he's a contentious asshole, but I don't necessarily agree with your assessment even of him. I feel like I'd love to see examples of what you're talking about that really piss you off. And that'd be great. And that could be a subject of a future conversation. And
I will get us a little YouTube playlist of outrageous shit that Matt Gaetz says.
Yeah.
And we will do an 8-hour marathon of 30-second clips of him. Look, I'm picking on him, but that's actually, I can go with you on Trump gets because Trump talks for 3-hour blocks, and you can pull out 30 seconds of that, and that MSNBC does that. Yeah. But it's also kind of a strategy for him. And it's 100% a strategy for a guy like Matt Gaetz. I was going to say Joe Biden called Republican voters garbage. Did you watch the reaction of Democrats? You watch everybody like, oh, he's just being no, they said that was wrong. He shouldn't have said that.
No, I saw several reactions by several of his surrogates who said that he stutters and says things that are improper. His campaign certainly said that, but yeah.
I'm just saying, in general, Democrats weren't all like, oh, yeah. It was like, no, that's not how we want to be.
I guess my point is just, I do think your perception of anybody is skewed by whoever's delivering you the news. If you spent 2 hours with Matt Gaetz on a podcast, I don't know, maybe you would leave thinking he's a complete dipshit asshole, but you might have a different opinion of him than what you see in the news. And I would say that is absolutely the case. If I spent 2 hours with Kamala Harris or Joe Biden, or you pick the most annoying person on the left that I could think of, and I'm trying to think who that would be, I guarantee you if I spent 2 hours with them, I'd have a different appreciation for him.
I guess I hark back to the conversation we had at the outset of the first Trump presidency. That may be true, but I don't think Matt Gaetz is a victim in that case. I think that's a strategy. I don't think he's misquoted. I think he's playing them like a fiddle.
Yeah, possibly, but I don't want to make this podcast into me defending Matt Gaetz. That's not the guy I want to defend.
Kyle, you're going to be defending Matt Gaetz for 4 years.
Well, I may defend him on his decisions as Attorney General. I'm okay with that. I did like his questioning style in Congress. I will say that. That was interesting. Made for some good YouTube clips.
I will put them on the playlist.
Excellent.